I am Laura Spate, Executive Director of the Policy Center. As we continue to advance the success of minority farmers, the Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers Policy Research Center, located at Alcorn State University, is creating a series of video podcasts designed to educate minority farmers, ranchers, and agricultural professionals on agricultural policies impacting minorities and their communities. Each podcast will focus on an area of agricultural policy and its impact on minority farmers. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Policy Center Live, where we discuss issues and challenges for our socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and presented by the Policy Center. My name is Dr. Kara Woods. I am the research analyst at the Policy Center, and I am joined by Dr. Johnny Gillian, Senior. And today we'll be discussing access to credit and the barriers that socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers face when trying to access credit. So I am very excited about this topic. It's one that I think has really plagued socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers for a very long time, and is one of the barriers and footholds that seems to limit so many of our farmers or ranchers and keep them in the same economic standpoint and not being able to develop. So once again, I am so excited for Dr. Gillian to join us and, share a little bit about it so we can learn, and then also see about the research that he is finishing up with his team. Dr. Gillian, please introduce yourself. I did not do you justice, so please introduce yourself and also introduce the research that you have been conducting with your team that has been funded by the Policy Center.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. My name again is John Gilliland, and I'm the former chair of the Department of Public Policy and Administration at Alcorn State University, and I'm the manager owner of JBG and Associates. I've been working with the Policy Center now since 2016. The study, my association with the center began as a study for just Mississippi and the farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers in Mississippi. That study was expanded to 5 states that included Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Virginia. So I completed the study 2018 to determining the impact of the 2014 Farm Bill on socially disadvantaged farmers in these 5 states. These states were selected primarily because of the concentration of minority farmers, Black farmers, in these particular states. It was 3 parts to the study. Mm-hmm. The first part of the study was to determine access to credit. If farmers were receiving from the USDA the assistance that was promised. The second part of the study was what were the perceptions of the USDA among socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. And then the third part of the study was to tie the previous 2 studies into the data from the 2017 Census of the Agriculture. And what we determined at that point is that Black farmers were minority farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, were shrinking. Their numbers were declining everywhere. The access to credit was limited. And so I was recommissioned by the center to determine the impact of the 2018 Farm Bill and some of the subsequent assistance that the USDA provided socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers in 2018 and 2021. So I've completed the first two phases of the study. I've looked at the access to credit. Access to credit is critical. Farmers need credit in order to provide the infrastructure for their farms, to provide land, to actually work the farm. The socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers are not among the most privileged economically of all of the farmers in this country. So access to credit to them is critical. It's their lifeblood. The USDA has the responsibility to make sure that agriculture succeed in this country. And socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers are part of that fabric, the fabric of reducing agriculture for the benefit of the nation. Now, I don't know how much you want me to go into this, Kara, but the promises of USDA to Black farmers came out of the settlement, where Black farmers, where the USDA agreed that they had discriminated against Black farmers, initially Black farmers, and later expanded to the other ethnic races and ethnic group, including women. So I've completed the first two phases of this three-part study, which is loans and perception. And I want to speak a little bit now before Kara about perception, and we can talk about it a little bit later as you like. Black farmers, minority farmers, marginalized farmers or producers have been promised by the USDA to make up for these inequities that have occurred over decades. And each time these promises are made, there are raised expectation among the community. But each time, what we found is that they're hurdle. And some of those hurdles have become walls. And most recently, with the promise of the current administration of loan forgiveness and some of the other programs, I think it was about a $4 billion program. Again, we find in the community raised expectations. The problem with raised expectations is that disappointment can be of equal magnitude, as farmers are not sufficiently informed, or legal hurdles or challenges to their access to capital. That disappointment is profound. And it does have an impact on whether or not many socially disadvantaged farmers, whether or not they continue to farm. Mm-hmm. And Kara, I think maybe I explained that for you. If there's another question that you might have on that, we can deal with that.
Yes, and thank you, because I think that is a great introduction to what the real issue is, right? So you gave a little bit of history to let us know that this is not something that has just started. This is something that, like you said, has gone on for generations and decades. And so now, as it seems like we're getting a little bit of light from, new administrations or new policies that have been put into the Farm Bill, new programs from USDA, the most important thing is how does it impact the people that it's trying to reach? And once we evaluate that, has it succeeded in its initial reasoning of being? And I think that's why your study with you and your team is just so important, because it does just that. So much is put into the farm bill every 4 to 5 years, but as we know, socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers are usually smaller farmers. We don't have as much acreage. Air property has a disadvantage and limits us. And it also limits the access to credit. And so when new policies and new programs are put in, it really needs evaluating, because, like you said, these farmers are diminishing. And so we're putting in new programs, and yet the number is still diminishing. Something still is not quite right. And so I thank you for that overview.
Well, one of the things, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
One of the things that's troubling, a little bit troubling to me, is that as I look across the study of access to credit, the number of applications being submitted by socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, the approval rate, USDA, FSA approval rate, and their obligations are all trending down. Over the study period, all of that, the number of loans, the number of applications, and the number of funds, the instances of funds obligated are also going down. Now, I say that in the same breath that I say that funds available are increasing, but the number of loans provided has been decreasing. What it means with that, when we interpret that, that says is that the USDA are providing more loans in size and amount, but fewer loans. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with that is that as much money as the USDA provide, it barely scratches the surface. In my study in 2021, and I'm trying to, in 2021, the USDA provided 6,177 loan obligations nationwide, total US. Now, there are 1.5 million socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. 1.5 million, okay? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The non-white distribution of that population is 19%. So in 2021, what we find is that white women represent 81% of the total distribution of socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers.
Now, Dr. Gillian, before you go into that, can we do an explanation as to why white women are included in the term socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers? Because I don't think that is very, I don't think many people are aware that white women are included in some circumstances to be a socially disadvantaged farmer and rancher.
Well, part of that is that white women also display a history of discrimination in this country, a history of discrimination. The majority of farmers, producers in this country are white men. And until, I can't remember the year, Kara, I'm having a senior moment, but until the Black farmers had won their claim, the USDA acknowledged their claim that they were discriminated against, other ethnic groups soon followed. Hispanics, American Indians, Islanders, Pacific Islanders, and then women. And so they successfully made their claim that they too had been discriminated against. Now, the problem with that is that as the policy, the legislature that provided financial benefit to assistance to socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, the funding got to where it's overwhelmed. And when we see the distribution of how many loans non-white socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers are receiving, there's a question about whether or not the number of loans that are being made in these communities are sufficient for their survival. And there's a model I'll show you a little bit later where we actually looked at the distribution of loans in terms of number by population distribution, their distribution within the category of socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. One thing I do want to point out is that the data provided by USDA in terms of the loans, the annual reports, does not break that down specifically.
Right.
So what we ended up having to do was to look at the distribution of the population, because what we found is that a lot of the loans provided by USDA is less than market value. The interest rate's less than market value. So for established firms where there might have been previously owner listed primarily as white male, would not have been eligible for those loans. By the wife or significant other declaring themselves socially disadvantaged, they too now qualify for those loans.
Okay, I'm gonna have to I'm gonna stop you again, because I think that is such an important piece that not many people are aware of. So we have socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers that include many ethnic groups, minority groups that we think of: Black, Latino, Pacific Islander, Native American Indian. And then we have also included white female under FSA and some other USDA programs. Now, because of that, right, they're able to apply and become eligible for certain programs that were then reserved for minority farmers. And as a result, some of these farms that were male owned or male led have since changed who their farm is led by to a wife, a daughter, some white female. So now that farm may qualify for those same programs. Is that what what we're saying?
There were 1.4 million individual or producers that qualified as socially disadvantaged in 2017. Okay. And what we saw, this is the census from the Census of the Agriculture. What we saw in that, 81.3% of them were white women.
Mm-hmm.
Hispanics were 7.9%, Native Americans were 4%, Blacks were 3%, two or more races 1.8%, 1.9%, and Asian 1.5%. So of that 6,177 loans, white women, based upon their distribution of the population, could meet and qualify for 5,023 of those loans. That left slightly more than 1,000 loans left for the other categories of the socially disadvantaged group into receiving loans. So the concern that I have from this particular piece is that the addition of white female inside of the category of socially disadvantaged is siphoning away from the original intent of the policy, to assist these marginalized communities, especially Black producers. Black producers, when we looked at in the 2017 census, Black producers were the least rewarded of all the ethnic groups, white, Native American, all of them. Their income was the lowest level. So in my current study, what I'm finding is that, first of all, the negative perception of USDA has increased, not improved. It's increased. And part of it is because there are many of the farmers that participated in a survey do not feel that the system, the USDA system, has treated them fairly. And go to slide 52. Let's look at Alabama, for instance.
Okay.
Alabama they had 103 loans obligated in 2021. Of those 103 obligated loans, 79 of them women, white women. That left basically 26 left statewide of loans for the other ethnic groups in the state. We go to a similar chart in Louisiana, slide 54. There were 171 loans that were obligated by USDA. Of that 171, 128 to white women. That left less than 50 for the other ethnic groups. Let's go to Mississippi.
Dr. Gillian, let me mention, as you're naming these states, the Policy Center has a access to credit project also with Walmart. It's funded through Walmart, but what we did was partner with 9 1890s and 7 1890s and 2 LLC community-based organizations in states that had the highest amount of Black farmers. And these states that you're mentioning are in the top 5. So you have to say, it's only 16 Black farmers in Alabama that received a loan, but this is the third biggest state, or the third largest state that has the amount of Black farmers. So it's not that Black farmers are not in Alabama. Like I said, we have over 1,400 Black farmers in Alabama. And that's why you have to make sure that you're saying this, because it's not that we can't find Black farmers. They're there, but they're still not applying and then getting accepted for these loans. Sorry to interrupt you. I know you were going to go over Mississippi next, and Mississippi is the second, number 2 for the amount of Black farmers. And so again, it's imperative that we give all this information so then you can really question what's the issue. And like you said, is it ciphering some of the loans that would then go to the initial farmer, and why the policy in fact was created?
In Mississippi, this is slide 56. In Mississippi, there were 128 loans. Black farmers in Mississippi are 28.6% of the producers inside of the category of socially disadvantaged farmers in the state. Of those 128, white women, 85. Black farmers, 37. Hispanics, 3. Asians, 1. Native American, 1. So the concern is that this is not isolated to any single state.
Right.
It's nationwide. And so it's not hard to surmise the level of mistrust of the USDA and dissatisfaction with the USDA among socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. Now, let's go to slide 61. And we've seen this scenario play out time and time again when there have been federal assistance to aid a marginalized community. The advantaged community always seemed to figure out a way to siphon those funds away from the original community that those funds were intended to help. And so what we looked at was we looked at Snyder and Ingram's and Wilson's social construction theory. The advantaged group are in strong political power positions. And as a result of that, they're able to demand their inclusion or intrusion into these policies to assist marginalized communities. So non-Hispanic white women are members of the dominant white-only producers. They are 92.4% of the producer population. Non-white producers are 7.9% and are often perceived as a dependent group. So any assistance that you provide to dependent group, there is a culture, political culture, that assumes that to be a handout. And so to assist a dependent group, you consider the program as not as a social program, which gives it a negative connotation. Slide 62, please. So when we look through these two lenses of critical mass theory, the USDA makes these loans with the intent, let's not say hope, with the intent that socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers eventually become independent. Mm-hmm. But when we look through this lens of critical mass theory, what we see is that the amount of support that's being provided to socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers is much less than they need in order to get to a critical mass so that they can become independent. What we see is the amount of support coming to Black farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, not necessarily white women, just enough to say that they're politically engaged, that you're not forgotten. There does not appear to be enough aid for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, specifically the non-white socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, to provide that critical mass to where only a little bit of help will make a difference. We haven't gotten to that point to where we've reached the tipping point, to where we build up enough critical mass to where they can survive on their own. Now, we are in the Inflation Reduction Act and through the Department of Agriculture, almost $5.2 billion is out there to assist socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. The question is how much of that is going to make its way to socially disadvantaged farmers, and especially in this particular study, Black farmers, in order to assist them to survive. What we've seen is that we've seen diminishing number of farms, diminishing number of acres, and diminishing number of producers among them. What we've got to do in order to save Black farmers and keep them as a fabric, part of the fabric of agriculture in the United States, is that we have to find a way to get sufficient aid to them in terms to allow them to acquire land, in terms of equipment, but more importantly, Black farmers, there is no established formal market for their goods and services. We often see them relegated to trying to sell their goods at farmers markets and along the road. So in order to attract this new generation of farmers, we need to do two things. We need to make sure that they can see farming as a viable, profitable, family-sustaining occupation. And I think that this administration has made some significant moves, in order to assist that. Now, where we are going forward, we will be with this going forward. We need to argue on the basis of where we've been. The damage that was done to socially disadvantaged was of significant magnitude. And the level of assistance that they need in order to survive should be of equal or greater magnitude in order for us to continue to be a part of this country's story in agriculture. Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
Well, you made a great point that we argue at the Policy Center every single day, is that equity is needed. And there's a big difference between equity and equality, because if you give us equal resources, as we see that we're giving to or white women who are considered socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, they're still improving. They're getting the most loans, they're getting the most money. And so when you compare that to somebody else who isn't a white woman, a Black farmer, a Native Indian farmer, you're seeing that it's not equal. So if you give us things that make it equitable, I'm going to be able to catch up to where we both are, receiving the same things, and then we all are on the same playing field. But if you give me something that gives equal, well, I'm still going to be below, because I started, below. I started at 0. I started at 1 or 2, and, my counterpart started ahead of me. And so we need something that's going to create equity for our socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. And that's a key piece in it.
Well, this is one issue. This one issue, Dr. Woods, is that I keep that's echoed across all of the states, and this is the issue of fairness. Most of the farmers and ranchers do not feel that they are being treated fairly when they visit their USDA FSA office. Mm-hmm. They are often allowed to submit applications only to be told after they've submitted the application, there's no more money. They're not being treated with the level of dignity and respect that any consumer should receive from any provider. And the USDA is public service. Excuse me.
Yes. And like you said, it's the USDA is the people's the people's uh, what is it? The People's Program or the People's Service or something like that. That is their motto. And so, once again, at the Policy Center, we are do away with the county offices, because as we have seen, those are the places where the most injustice has happened, and the lack of oversight of that has caused socially disadvantaged farmers not to want to go back, not to want to participate. And so, as we close in this discussion, I just want to say, thank you for your research. Thank you for what you have found and what you are recommending as well.
Can you just allow me one more statement?
Of course.
One of the things that I want to point out is that the issue with black farmers is not solely USDA and the amount of money that they loan. We have some inherent problems that we are part of, like air property. We can't borrow against air property. There's very little that we can do. There are several things that we need to address ourselves in order to assist the survival of black farming. But I do want to point out one of the most crucial pieces is the role of the USDA. And the last part on that is this. These loans you have to qualify for, which means that white women are in better positions to qualify for these loans than socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. So there has to be some change to take place in the process. And I thank you, Carol, for giving me the opportunity to participate, because before becoming a part of the Policy Center, a lot of this impact, information, these changes in our society was lost on me. I see now the necessity.
Well, again, thank you to you and your team for working so diligently to bring this to light. And one thing that I want to say is that what we have been finding is that socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, especially Black farmers, are over surveying. They have survey fatigue. They don't believe that their survey amounts to anything because they don't see the change. And, we just have to employ more and more that when a researcher like myself, like Dr. Gillian, like someone on his team comes and asks for a survey, asks for 10 minutes, is so we can get some information like this, so we can get data rich research that then can be turned into policy recommendations for the Farm Bill, given to House and Senate Ag, given to the Congressional Black Caucus. And so, we understand that there has been so many years that you felt like, you were giving surveys and talking to deaf ears, but we are so, just ecstatic at the Policy Center to work with somebody of the caliber of yourself and your team and others that we work with, because it is truly highlighting issues in ways that we can hopefully make a change. And so, again, thank you for your time. We're going to, let me say this. We're going to expand on this a little bit more. Of course, with each episode of the Policy Center Live, we discuss another topic that has some type of historical base, but also hopefully some piece of change that we are making in the lives of socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers to continue that farming legacy. And so now we actually have social media. And so I have to shout that out. We have a Facebook, we have an Instagram, so you can go and follow us, see our happenings, see some of the presentations and places we're going and trying to connect with farmers and ranchers. But again, don't say no to those surveys. We need your voice. We need what has happened and what you are hoping happens from it. And so continue to work with us so we can work for you. Dr. Gillian, I'm gonna let you have the last word, and then I'll say see us next time on Policy Center Live. Thank you so much.
When you don't fill out the surveys, when you don't respond to the surveys, you're giving up one of the most significant weapons that you have in order to fight for the things that you think that you deserve. You're giving up your voice. So please, please participate. Don't be silent.